Now, this video isn't about Jimmy Kimmel, if you like him or not. It's about something so much bigger. It's about free speech in America and how different it feels today compared to the past.
We look forward to a world founded upon four essential human freedoms. The first is freedom of speech and expression everywhere in the world.
If we take America back a few decades, comedians like George Carlin, like Richard Pryor, they could stand on stage and say things that shocked and offended the people. They said things that even got them arrested.
Suggestive, cursing, cussing, swearing, and all I could think of was shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, and tits.
But their voices were not immediately silenced by the networks or the corporations. Even Saturday Night Live in the 70s made so many political satire, but it stayed on air. Free speech was messy, and it's always been messy, but the thing is, it was allowed to be messy. Today, that feels so different in the US. One controversial line, one monologue, and the response is immediate. Networks pulling shows, corporations cutting ties, regulators threatening action. Jimmy Kimmel isn't the first. We've seen this with Roseanne, we've seen this with Colbert, we've seen this with Chappelle. The tolerance for edgy speech is shrinking by the day in the US. Not in the courts, so it's not legal. It's shrinking in our culture. So the question is, what changed? Why does free speech in America feel so much tighter and controlled than it ever did before? To understand the past, let's look at what happened today. In his monologue, Jimmy Kimmel made remarks about the killing of Charlie Kirk. He suggested that the shooter might be aligned with MAGA and that the conservatives were trying to avoid responsibility. And the reaction to this was immediate. FCC Chairman Brendan Carr accused Kimmel of spreading misleading statements. Then two of ABC's biggest affiliate groups, Nexstar and Sinclair, stopped airing his show. And then ABC pulled Jimmy Kimmel Live off of air immediately. So if you focus just on ABC, one might think, well, this is all about accountability, a network deciding one of its hosts crossed a line. But there is a bigger problem. Because under the US law, the standard for punishing speech is incredibly high. The Supreme Court says that speech can only be restricted if it is intended to incite imminent violence or likely to do so. So Kimmel's remark didn't even come close to that. And that's the scary part. They were literally political satire. Maybe sloppy, maybe unfair, but legally still protected speech. Which then leaves us with a bigger question. What does this say about free speech in America today? If we rewind a few decades back in the US, the environment for free speech looked very different. In the 1960s, George Carlin was arrested for performing his famous 7 dirty words. Then Lenny Bruce was put on trial multiple times for obscenity. Richard Pryor said things on stage that shocked mainstream America. And yet, despite the outrage, their work shaped our culture. Networks back then didn't immediately pull the plug. In fact, their controversies became part of a larger conversation about the boundaries of comedy and free expression. So back then, even political satire thrived. Saturday Night Live in the 70s and 80s mocked presidents repeatedly and openly. And I recall David Letterman in the 90s, he pushed so many buttons. But the point is, controversial speech was never met with cancellation because that was part of the American tradition of free speech. Now compare that to today. One wrong line, one wrong monologue, one joke taken out of context, and the fallout is instant. The Constitution has not changed. The difference is our culture has changed. Networks, corporations, and advertisers have become so quick to shut things down out of fear. Fear of regulators, fear of political pressure, fear of social media outrage that spreads in minutes like wildfire. So when we talk about free speech then versus now, it's not about laws, it's about the climate. So after seeing all this happen, I was thinking, what really changed? I think the first point is polarization. America has become so much divided today than it ever was before. Every joke, every comment, every slip up is filtered through a political lens. I mean, even one-on-one conversations with friends are filtered through a political lens. What once used to be considered, comedy now becomes a weapon in the culture war. And the second point, I think, is corporate risk aversion. Networks and studios, they're not thinking about defending principles and speech. They're thinking about protecting revenue. Advertisers don't want controversy. Affiliates don't want angry phone calls. And regulators like FCC hold a real power over broadcast licenses. So instead of standing by their talent, companies are now choosing the safest option. Silence the voice, cancel the show, remove the risk. And for what? To keep the people in power, like FCC and the president, happy. The third point I think that's feeding into this culture about free speech today is social media. Back in the day, in the 60s, controversy spread so slowly, through newspapers, through word of mouth. And today, a single clip goes viral in minutes, which then immediately forces corporations to react faster, and sometimes they don't even fact check. So if you put all of this together, now we have a culture where free speech is still protected by law, but it is restricted by fear. Fear of losing money, fear of government pressure, fear of the mob online. So now here is the irony. Legally, free speech in America is still stronger than ever. First Amendment hasn't changed. Comedians, writers, and everyday people still have the right to say things that offend people, that criticize people, that challenge situations, especially those in power. But the culture of America has shifted. What once would have been debated, now it's punished. What once was tolerated as edgy or provocative is now seen as risky. So that doesn't mean that people have lost their legal rights. It means that corporations, advertisers, and regulators hold more power over the voices that are being heard. So legally speaking, we the people still hold a power. We just need to act on it. Jimmy Kimmel's firing isn't about one late night host. It's about a bigger problem. It's about the climate where fear dictates speech more than laws do. Where satire, the very tool that's supposed to challenge power, is being tamed by power itself. And when you compare today's America to the past, when Carlin and Pryor and Letterman and early SNL could push the envelope and still stay on air, you see the difference. So maybe the real question isn't whether free speech still exists or not, but instead, are we willing to live with the discomfort that true free speech brings? Because without that tolerance for discomfort, without that space for voices we don't agree with, free speech becomes less of a right and more of a privilege which can be granted or revoked at the discretion of those that are in control. And I think that more than anything says a lot about where America is today.